Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Beth Hardy, and I am the owner of Heart Tones Birth Services in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm here today talking with a good friend of mine and a client, Caroline. And we're talking about her baby feeding journey. My reason for having these conversations has been to open up the conversation and kind of show that there's a lot of different ways we can feed our babies. There's not just one way. And I think so many of us who work in the birth space see that there's a lot of pressure or a lot of like, oh, well, the best way is breastfeeding. Like that's the best. So like, if you don't do that, well, I guess it's okay, but like you really should do that. And I hate that. Like, I don't think that's true. And I think that really the best way is actually whatever way works best for each individual parent. So I'm excited to talk to Caroline today and just hear about your journey, Caroline, and kind of what your process was with feeding James. So maybe just start by saying hello, telling me about yourself a little bit and your family, and then start with just your baby feeding story so far. Where are you at with it right now?
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And if you guys know Beth, you know you are a privileged person to have her in your life. And especially if you get the chance to work with her. She is amazing. And my life is better for it. So as Beth said, I'm Caroline. I am 27 years old. My husband and I had our first baby almost 10 months ago. He is almost 10 months old. And we were living in New York City a couple years ago and moved to Utah to be closer to some family, thinking that, we were ready to try having kids and we didn't want to do that all alone in New York. And so as far as baby feeding goes, I was like the pregnant person that needed to know everything. I needed to like research everything and know all my options. And I kind of always had it in my head that I would breastfeed. I mean, my mom breastfed all 6 children that she had. And kind of, just what I was used to seeing. I have had cousins a couple years before me start to have children, and I saw them breastfeed. And I figured, there are so many resources out there now, especially with social media, like good and bad social media. I mean, it brought us together, so it can't be all bad. But like with social media, there's just so much information. And so there was, as soon as the internet knew I was pregnant, it was like, here's all this information about feeding. And it was all breastfeeding. And in some way it made it easy because there was like a wealth of knowledge to pull from and a lot of really good useful information to get, just like the physiology behind breastfeeding. Hadn't really, you don't have to think about it, so you don't have to wrap your head around it until you're about to do it. And long story short, it didn't work out for me. And where we're at now is we have been doing formula feeding probably exclusively since, I want to say, about, I don't know, 8-10 weeks, is probably when I stopped doing any sort of like pumping at all. And little James is thriving. He's almost a year, well, be a year old in a couple months. And it's formula feeding has taken us this far, and it's been absolutely amazing.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. I think I want to get into more details too about kind of your process of like what you use and like what brands you like and stuff, because I think even that kind of stuff is helpful for people to know. Because I think, I don't know about you, but like whenever I go to any grocery store, I'm completely overwhelmed with all the options. And I think it's like choice fatigue or whatever, decision fatigue. And
Totally.
I guess we could jump into that actually. What do you like, and how did you find a formula that worked for you?
Yeah. So I kind of did a couple of things, and I'll probably start with what I believe is maybe not quite a mistake, because if anyone else is using this and it works for them, that's wonderful, but just something to be cautious of. With starting to formula feed, I was really obsessed with like, what's the best for James, since I'm not giving him my breast milk, like what's the next best alternative. And there's just so much out there about like European formula. And you can get European formula in the US, but it has to be like an online thing. It has to come from a vendor because it's not sold in the US because it doesn't, go through the FDA or whatnot. And there are a lot of wonderful things about European formula. Certain kinds of different like levels of what is included versus what's included in the United States formulas. And so I was like, okay, that's my thing. Like that's what I'm going to use. And found out that it's just not, it's maybe not as safe because it just doesn't go through the same supply chains as US formulas, as someone that lives here. And so I did use that European brand formula. It was called like Holly or Hip or something like that. I think it was Holly, Holle. It was wonderful formula. I mean, my son loved it. Like James like chugged it down. But eventually I switched because there was just a little something like in the back of my head that was like, you know, this may be the best, like this may be what everyone's saying is like the best, but I don't know like where I'm getting it from. You know, I can go to a grocery store and like see the formula on the shelves. I don't know where that's coming from. I eventually switched to actually a new formula brand called Bobby, and it is the first US formula that is also made with European like regulation ingredients. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. It actually it was born just a couple months after James, and so it was great because I was like, okay, this is what I care about. I'm going to switch to this, and I did that, and it worked out wonderfully. And as far as I know, they are not like sold in grocery stores, or maybe they are, but they do have an online subscription, which has also been really great, like just for mindless, you know, knowing I'm always going to have some formula. But it's new. It's one of like the first new formulas introduced in a really long time in the United States, because apparently it's a really like strict process. Like formula is just highly, highly regulated. And which also made me feel safe feeding it to James. And I think it's like a mom owned, like female founded company. So made me feel good about that. But as you said, there's like so many options, right? So I kind of went with one direction of what I was familiar with. I had heard great things about this like European formula. Then a US European formula like hybrid was introduced. I went with that and switched to that. At the end of the day, though, what I realized is there have been times that we have needed to buy a can of formula to like supplement here and there. It's all good. Like it's all good for your baby. It doesn't need to be European formula. It doesn't need to be from, you know, a female founded brand. If that's stuff that you care about, great, there are options for you and that stuff exists. But if, you know, the goal is to feed your baby, have a happy, healthy baby, like formula, any formula will provide that for you. And I've learned that a great resource for me has actually been someone on Instagram called the Formula Mom, and that is like her thing. She has exclusively formula fed her babies after a really difficult first like postpartum experience with her first baby, and she has like all this information on basically every brand of formula. So if you know are looking for a certain something, or just like need some guidance, or maybe you're not sure if your baby takes to like dairy well, or you know, is extra like gassy or fussy, she has wonderful resources on, you know, guiding you through the formula world. So yeah, that's kind of how I chose the formula that I've been using. We've been using Bobby now for forever, but I have, you know, gone to Target and grabbed, you know, a couple store brands, a random thing here and there. And it can potentially be a little hard on your baby's tummy to do like a quick switch like that. We haven't really had any problems, and it's good to know that, you know, in a pinch like this exists for a reason. Like it is there to help you and feed your baby.
I love that. I think of it like I've seen something somewhere that was like, you know, breastfed or bottle fed, we're all going to hit our kids' head on the door when they get in the car. Like we're all going to give them chicken
Yeah.
nuggets at some point. Like they're going to eat mac and cheese at some point. Like they're going to do, we do our best.
He already has.
Yeah, like yeah, we do our best. And like you said, like there are times where you do what works for you or what's convenient or what you can do at that moment. And like that's amazing and awesome. Like feeding our babies that's the point. It's just getting them fed and keeping them alive and healthy. Were there any really big hurdles you had to overcome, whether like mental, emotional, or like other people or
Yeah.
physical things? What were some of the big hurdles
I
you had to
mean,
overcome?
like 100%.
Mm.
You know how difficult the early days were for me. You have like that like delirious high in the hospital where you're just happy you survived and that you're alive, your baby's there, everyone's okay. And I it kind of started then a little bit, but immediately, you have people, telling you, okay, like, so this is what you're going to do when you breastfeed. There's just this assumption of breastfeeding, which is fine because that's kind of what I had assumed for myself too. Um, but I had some concerns. I was, for better or worse, because I knew so much beforehand. I was like, oh, I don't know if my like boob shape is going to be conducive to breastfeeding. Like, I don't know if, like, do I have inverted nipples? Do I have flat nipples? Like, there were just all these things I didn't know. And so I had a lactation consultant, come in, and she like checked what we were working with, and she was like, okay, well, your milk obviously hasn't come in yet, and it's not supposed to, like, right after, but she's like, give it some time, see what happens in the meantime. If you're worried about milk supply, and she said it was possible I could have a low milk supply just based on like the shape of my breasts and like how much they had actually changed throughout my pregnancy. Just based on some questions she had asked me, she thought it could be the case that maybe I wouldn't have a crazy milk supply. And so at that moment, I was like, okay, well, if I don't, I don't, and that's okay. So she taught me how to pump, and I pumped in the hospital, because my son gave me a blood blister on my nipple like in 30 seconds. As soon as we first tried latching. So that was already like my, okay, not doing this anymore in the hospital. I wanted to give my body a little time to like heal. So I was pumping. It was just like a new experience, not really sure like where this is going, how much you're getting. Anyway, you go home and then suddenly like you're on your own, like you're doing it on your own. There's no one coming in to like check on you and see how you are. And while I was lucky to, my husband had time off work, and my mom was able to fly out to be with me. I had you. There was still that like, oh my gosh, I don't have that round the clock like hospital care. I can't just be like, hey, I need help. Come like help me. So very quickly, my mental health deteriorated because here I was pumping, trying to have my milk come in. Here I was also trying to every now and again try latching my baby, like on the other breast, to see if maybe he would, take to it. And it just was this natural thing. And my blood blister on the other one would heal, and like it would all work out. And then here we are also giving him formula in the meantime. So there were three modes of like feeding going on in my head. And for one, when you are pumping, you are doing that every 3 hours in the beginning to help bring in that milk supply. Most babies are eating every 2 to 3 hours anyway. So you're really trying to like mimic that. And on top of that, when you're pumping, you're kind of stuck to your pumping chair. There are hands-free options, but it's not what I had. And so you're stuck to that. You've got like a 20, maybe 30-minute commitment. You can't really do anything else. And then you give them what you get. And it was paralyzing for me. It was too much. I felt just like I was tied to this machine. I felt like I wasn't actually having the experience of feeding my baby, because I was so overwhelmed with just like the feeding cycle, that because we were also using supplementing with some formula, someone else would feed it to him because they saw like what a hard time I was having. And I think that like really hurt me mentally, because it felt like, okay, here I am not feeding him directly like from my chest. Here I am trying to produce, milk for him, but I also don't know how to latch him. So am I just going to be pumping forever? But everybody knows that I'm pumping. So they offer to feed him what I get. Or, I'm so tired. So they offer to supplement with formula for me. So here I am, never actually like holding my son while he's being fed. Um, and that like detachment from him and focusing so much though on what I could give him like really ruined that like beginning relationship for me. So that was just so hard. And it took you, it took my mom, and it finally took my doctor saying this isn't like worth your mental health. Stop pumping. It's okay. Like forget trying to latch him. It's okay. Formula is is perfectly healthy. It's wonderful. And my mom reminded me also that it's kind of a generational thing. Like her generation was sort of raised on formula, and my mom and her siblings are wonderful humans that have grown up to have their families and, their jobs and live great lives and, are healthy humans. And formula just helped them in the very beginning. And once I realized that and I just let that guilt go and those expectations go, I had more time with my son, which is what I wanted. And I let go of that pumping prison. And also I just let my body kind of go back to what it was, and I think that was helpful for me. And eventually my milk did come in. I did give him some of what I was pumping as I tried to wean myself from pumping, but very quickly it was all formula.
Wow, what a journey you went through. I'm so glad you had support like me and your mom and your doc who was great. And like it's even with that support, like you said, like it's just a lot of isolation and a lot of like
Totally.
mental, it's hard as all get out. It's super
Yeah.
hard. So yeah.
Yeah, and here I had three people who like I love and respect, who like know things, who have been through this before, like telling me it's okay, like you can choose, you don't have to be doing this. And even then it was like it took three of those people telling me stop. So I guess if anyone needs to hear it from another person, if you don't want to breastfeed and you want to formula feed, it's okay. Stop.
Love that. Thank you for saying that. Were there any unexpected, like awesome parts, like joys or benefits that you just didn't know were going to happen with formula feeding?
I mean, yeah, totally. I really think my mental health was impacted not connecting with my baby during those little quiet like feeding moments. So that was a huge plus for me, was like I finally got to have that with him. It also felt like something I could do. Like, okay, I can make a bottle of formula and feed him, because I was going through, postpartum depression. Felt like there were very little things I could do, or like I had any real control or power over, but I could make a bottle of formula and I could feed that to him. So that, I mean, that was a huge plus to just the connection I felt with my son, which is so funny because you hear a lot of the time that like breastfeeding is that way to like get that connection and get that, oxytocin. But when you're depressed, that whether you're breastfeeding or not, like that oxytocin is not going to like compensate for the other chemical imbalances going on. And so, that formula took away so much of just like that stress and a lot of that depression cloud, which did allow that connection. Other benefit, other people are able to feed him. And there was sort of a, a bit of an imbalance. Like I wanted to feed him more in the beginning, and I wasn't getting to do that. However, now, it's like a 50-50 split between me and my husband. Like we each give him 2 bottles a day, which isn't the way it is every single day, but like how great is that, that weight of being the sole feeder and continually like life giver for your baby, because you're their life giver in the beginning, like in pregnancy and everything. I mean, you deliver them, you have given them life, and it doesn't end at delivery. Like then you continue to do that when you breastfeed. And so it's a beautiful thing, but it's also it's a huge responsibility and weight. So having other people being able to help you, or knowing that we can have a babysitter and They just shake up a bottle of formula. Like I don't need to plan, a pumping schedule or something. There's just this added sense of freedom, which I'm sure some people could perceive that as selfish, but really I just think, work smarter, not harder. If it's gonna if it's gonna work for you and your family, like we are so lucky that we live in a day and age with like these modern um conveniences and wonderful like medical inventions, and formula is one of those things that it's there to be used and utilized. And the more I learned about formula and whatnot, the more I realized, oh, people have been not breastfeeding for a long time. People have been having babies and not being the one to, breastfeed or chest feed or whatnot. There are like, I remember reading an article that there was some bottle, like the old, archaeological like type bottle that they discovered. And I was like, oh my goodness, people have been giving bottles for forever. Like this has been a thing. So yes, while like your body has this beautiful, like natural nourishing mechanisms that it can provide for your baby, it hasn't been easy. Like it's not, for some people it is, but for just finding that out made me realize, oh, okay, I'm sure like even cave woman, it was not easy. There were people where it wasn't easy. So yeah, the benefits of time and sharing responsibility, a little bit more flexibility and freedom. And then for me, having that connection with my son. I didn't think that that's what formula could give you. And it gave me like a wonderful um, like ability to actually enjoy my baby's presence.
That's really beautiful. I love that. Um, okay, so what would you tell someone, or if you can imagine yourself too, what do you wish someone would have told you, like in the beginning of the journey? Like let's say they're pregnant right now and they're looking
Yeah.
at all their options and they're on Instagram at 2 a.m. being like, oh my God, what do I do? I don't know. Like,
Like
what do you, yeah, what would you like, what would you wish
yeah.
someone would have told you, or what do you want to tell someone else who's in that space?
So I feel like the information that isn't out there is that it's not an all or nothing thing with breastfeeding, formula feeding, pumping. Um, that that combination of three didn't work for me. But if you're passionate about giving your baby, your milk, what you produce, and you also want to give them formula, you can do that. There's just a lot out there that it is like all one or all the other. Because eventually your baby's going to have a preference, or nipple confusion or whatever. You know what, if it comes to that, if you reach that, if it comes to that, cross that bridge when you get to it. But if you want to kind of see what works for you, like you don't have to decide that early on. I felt like for me, some of my anxiety came from hearing, yes, you can do this, but there will be a point where you won't be able to anymore. So it kind of made me feel like, okay, well, then why continue down this path if eventually my baby's either going to reject my boob or reject my milk or reject the formula? I might as well just go to formula now because I know that's eventually what I want to go to. I think had I had a bit more of a relaxed approach, um, then I could have continued to pump and supplement. That's something I'm not opposed to in the future, if we have other children. Um, and yes, there is something to be said for um, pumping or chest feeding to produce a supply for your child. But if if you want your options, you can have your options. And if you don't, you don't need to. If it's easier for you mentally to choose one and go with one, that's okay. Some people, exclusively pump, and that's wonderful. That people can do that, and yes, it takes up time and it's actually like really hard. And I feel like if breastfeeding had come naturally, like that would probably have been maybe the easiest thing, just in terms of, not making a bottle or not sitting and pumping for 20, 30 minutes. But yeah, you have options. You don't need to decide right out the gate what you want to do for the first year of your kid's life. You can pump, you can try and latch. You also can decide what you want. Like, you don't have to give it X number of tries one way or another before you feel like, oh, okay, I've struggled enough or I've suffered enough to be informed enough to make a decision. No, you can make that decision right off the get go for yourself. It really helps. I'm very lucky that I had like such a supportive partner. And I remember having conversations with him in the beginning saying, I want to breastfeed, but I don't know what the future is going to hold. And this is while I was pregnant. So he was kind of aware like this could be a struggle. And it ended up being a struggle for me. And even though I knew it could be a struggle, it was still hard. Um, yeah. So you have that. You don't need permission, I guess, from anyone else on what you want to do. If you want to do a combo, you want to do all three, you want to do two, you um, just decide it's not for you. Like, that's totally okay. There's so many ways to feed your baby, and it doesn't need to look like anybody else's.
Mm, I love that. Yeah. Um, I feel like that's a really great like place to just be like wrapping, because honestly, you've said so many things that I'm like, oh my God, highlight, bold, underline, like, yes, those things. It's so true that, and I mean, you're sharing your experience is amazing. And I just want to like ask you, I guess, or just say, okay, you're 10 months out, like you had a baby 10 months ago. That's amazing. It probably, I don't know if it feels like it flew by or if it crawled by, maybe both.
It's
It's
flown.
flown by. Yeah. 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 Where are you at now? Like, is he still, so he's probably still doing formula, and he's also eating some solids, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So um, he loves his solids. And it's funny because as soon as you get one thing sort of under your belt and you get a routine, there's a new milestone, there's something new that's introduced. And for a little bit, I had that anxiety creep up again when it came to solids and whatnot. And I had to take what I had learned about myself and my mental health with the whole um, you know nursing versus formula debacle. I had to take that when it came to the solid food world, because there is an equal amount of information out there about what is the best way to do that for your baby. And the best is nourishing your child. It's okay if you feed them a lot of those packets. It's okay if you're someone who makes the food ahead of time and is a meal prepper. It's okay if you are still figuring out the whole solid thing and your kid gets like one snack a day and sometimes gets two meals a day. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. And my focus is making sure that I am introducing him to lots of foods, getting him used to um, chewing things, just exposing him to things. And not every day is perfect. Someday it's like, okay, you've had, a few like fruit and vegetable packets, and other days I make a delicious like bolognese and I give him that and broccoli, you know? So it's like it's just this constant journey. And I think every step of the way there's there is new information and lots of just like voices. And while they can be useful and they can be helpful, they can be overwhelming as well. And so each step of the way, just like remind yourself, okay, I have this information at my fingertips. I'm going to choose from the information what's going to work for me in my life right now and for my baby. Otherwise, you can drown in that amount of information. And at the end of the day, what's most important is you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your kid. And taking care of your kid is making sure that they have what they need to eat. And it's a privilege to be able to worry about this. For a lot of people, that is not easy. It's a struggle. Just it could, even just like financially or not having the support around you. So um, but bottom line, take care of yourself and take care of your kid. It doesn't matter how you choose to do that. They're going to grow up and thrive no matter what. And I don't remember whether I was breastfed or formula fed.
Yep. That's a perfect spot to finish. Thank you, Caroline. I just appreciate you. You're an absolute gem of a person, and thank you for your time.
Always.
I'll stop the recording here and then we can say bye again in a second. But thanks everybody for joining us today.